morning, everybody. We're talking about converting percents to fractions today. We're talking about how the definition of some terms is going to influence how we're going to obviously solve it. We know that a percent means out of 100. Per means per, cent means 100, and we've talked in class about how that word part cent, cent, is in a lot of everyday words: century, centennial, cent, and dollar. And because we know that there are that many cents in a dollar, that we can also create that fraction form with a 100 denominator, and that's a pretty blanket statement. It's a pretty general rule that we can follow whenever we're trying to convert percents to fractions. So we have a little bit of notes there. I'll give you a second to jot those down. Pause it now, pause it now, pause it now. Okay, time to move on. And we'll move on here to some examples that I wrote on the coordinate plane board. If there's a little glare, I'm sorry about that. Can't really control too much. Just try to tilt your head or tilt the screen. I doubt that'll work. It's okay. But taking a look at some of the graphical examples that can be created by a percent of fraction problem, we always use a 10 by 10 grid. A 10 by 10 grid has those 100 small squares in the larger square, and we can see from this example that there are 15 shaded in squares in the entire 10 by 10 grid. They're shaded in blue. And if you can't see the outline of the 10 by 10 grid, it's right here. It's written in black. It's a little light. But because there are 15 shaded, there is 15% there's 15% in this 10 by 10 grid. So from the percent, we can get a fraction, and that fraction would be 15 over 100. So we can always write it as 15 over 100, and I'll do the same thing here. 15 over 100, and we'll come back to that in a second. Another example here, we have that there are 60 squares shaded in, so 60% of the squares are shaded in, 60 out of 100, something talked about before, and we would write that as 60 over 100. Again, we'll come back to that. A couple of just real life, textbook examples. If we see 86%, then we can convert it to 86 over 100. The hint that we talked about in class was that you have the percent symbol that looks like 100 actually, 100. Again, for 4%, 100. So that kind of gives you a little mental hint that you're talking about something that is compared to 100. So we have 86% is 86 over 100. I'll come back to that in a second. I'm coming back to a lot of stuff here. But we have 4%, which would be 4 over 100. Now, why am I coming back to these? Well, I think that everything that we have in common relates, in these examples, relates to the fact that they can all be simplified. This can be simplified, so can all the rest of these. So it's important to go back and simplify your fractions at all times, ratios as well, obviously. For this example, it looks like both of these values, 15 and 100, can be divided by 5 because they both fit the 5 divisibility rule. So that would give us a simplified fraction of actually 3 over 20. Okay, so that would be our simplified answer. Hope you can see that. It's 3 over 20. If I'm out of frame, I'm sorry. I'm moving around on a big screen here, and if I'm the entire screen, sorry. Taking a look at 60% here, 60 over 100. The biggest number that I can see that fits into 60 and 100 would actually be 20. Think about $20 bills. How many $20 bills would it take to make $60? How many $20 bills would it take to make $100? And that would actually end up simplifying to 3/5. Now, could you use something smaller? Obviously. You could divide by 10. You could divide by 5, you could divide by 2 to start off with, but overall you'd have to keep simplifying until you had that greatest common factor of 1 for the numerator and denominator. So that may take multiple steps. That's perfectly fine. Take your time, work all the way until you have nothing in common for those two values except for the number 1. It takes time sometimes. 86 over, 86 over 100, it looks like those are both even numbers, so I would divide them both by 2, and just so I can show the process for at least one question, here you go. Always write a balanced simplification there. 86 divided by 2 is 43, and 100 divided by 2, or just splitting 100 in half, would make 50. Now, since 43 and 50 have nothing in common, because 43 is actually what we call a prime number, and 50 has a lot of factors, but nothing in common with 43, we're going to call that simplest form. We're just going to circle that and move on. When we have 4%, again, we can think about the easier divisibility rules. These are both even numbers, so they're both divisible by 2. But I can also see that 4 goes into 100. 4 it divides into 100 evenly, so actually I can just divide by 4. I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to simplify this. 4 divided by 4 is, say it with me now, 100 divided by 4 is, think money, think quarters, 25. Very good. I hope that you were saying it and I'm just not sounding like a fool. If I am, no big deal. So the answer is going to be 1/25 or 1 to 25. So we have some good answers here, and this looks kind of busy. You might want to take a moment to jot some things down, write down some feedback, write down some questions that you can talk about in class, leave some feedback on a moto. But regardless, do something, get better, ask questions, and let's be as smart as we can be. I don't know if I'm on screen, but have a good morning.